Hello chums, and welcome to the Fastest Lap series, where I'll be putting all of the road cars in Gran Turismo 7 to the test. Each car will be scrutinised in a few ways, once with no upgrades and comfort soft tyres, once with all upgrades and racing soft tyres, and once with an engine swap if the option is available. All cars are tested on a PlayStation 5 controller because I am an unsophisticated proletarian, and I drive each car with no driver assists except for ABS. I am by no means a professional, but I can usually complete a lap without binning my car into a wall, so hopefully I can do each car justice. The chosen test track is the Nurburgring Sprint course for its variety of corner types, along with a few longer straights to test every aspect of a car's performance. Let's see today's contender. The Ford Mustang is a car that's been around since the 1960s and has gone through more ups and downs than the British Conservative Party. It represents one of the last holdouts of good old-fashioned American V8 sports cars. Depending on the generation, it is the car that's driven by a man who wears sunglasses indoors and has a slight tendency to drive into bystanders when leaving a car meet. Back in the 1960s, a Ford executive by the name of Lee Iacocca managed to convince petulant man-child Henry Ford II that the company should have an affordable quote-unquote small car to add to the company's roster. He wanted it to be sporty, good-looking, and to appeal to baby boomers who at the time were young and ready to buy their first new car. This is in contrast to the current day, where boomers can be found walking around car shows saying they don't make them like they used to, every time they see a car made before the oil crisis. The first generation Mustang reused parts from the Ford Falcon, the company's compact family sedan at the time. As you'll likely know, it was frighteningly popular and practically grew wings and flew out of showrooms, and then the oil crisis happened in 1973. Manufacturers had seen this coming to a limited extent with things like the 1970 Clean Air Act, or the notorious LA smog, and as a reaction, smaller, more fuel-efficient cars were predicted to become more popular. As a result, the second generation Mustang would have to be smaller than the previous model, which had become bloated and heavy as time had progressed. To achieve this, Ford reused the Ford Pinto platform, perhaps not the best idea given its reputation for murdering its owners. Engines ranged from a 90 horsepower 4-cylinder to a V8 with about 140 horsepower, so it was slow and uninspiring, but it still sold well. Just in time for the cocaine-fueled 1980s, the Fox-body Mustang was released with a smorgasbord of different engines that were still woefully underpowered until the mid-1980s when Ford figured out how to make a 5-litre V8 with more than 150 horsepower. And in true 1980s fashion, a 4-cylinder turbo model was also offered. The Fox body has something of a cult following thanks to its availability, customizability, and for the sheer range of engines, transmissions, and trims, meaning almost no two are the same. In 1993, the Fox body was replaced with the SN95, where blobby 1990s aerodynamics met some nostalgic styling. The 4-cylinder engine was ditched, and the old pushrod Windsor block was replaced with the modular 4.6, which finally made over 200 horsepower. But then, in the mid-2000s, the car we all know from Instagram videos of insufferable pricks crashing into hedges finally appeared, the S197. The nostalgic styling had been taken to another level entirely thanks to the lead designer Jay Mays, the same chap who was on the design team for the Audi TT in the previous video, go watch it please. The modular V8 now made over 300 horsepower, with a plethora of special editions and sportier models making 4, 5 or even 600 horsepower to make sure that the people you drive into are definitely paralysed. But then finally, we come to the S550 that you see here. Released in 2015, the new Mustang came with a few dramatic changes. Firstly, it was actually the first Mustang to be offered in right-hand drive for the British market. Previous Mustangs had a live axle at the rear, which is effectively a metal beam with a wheel bolted to either end. It's cheap and it's strong, which is good for drag racing, but it's quite rubbish at everything else, such as going around a corner or driving over a small bump. The new S550 featured independent rear suspension, which massively improved the ride and handling. Unbelievably, some people were actually angry about this, presumably because it's harder to run over pedestrians with it. A new entry-level 4-cylinder turbo was also offered, more or less the same engine you will find in the Ford Focus RS. But this car has the new at the time 5-litre Coyote V8, with a healthy 435 horsepower, which is more than enough for the slightly tubby 1700 kg curb weight. Like all unmodified cars in this series, this car has no upgrades that affect the performance in any way, and it is fitted with Comfort Soft tyres. The reason all cars are fitted with Comfort Soft tyres is because they will give a very rough approximation of how the real-life car will perform on some fancy Michelin Pilot Sport tyres, which are some of the better summer tyres on the market, which are road-biased but can handle a track day. While the sports tyres would be faster, there aren't many cars on the street rolling around on Cup 2R tyres. This Mustang is fun to drive, unless you want to drive it fast. This car loves to slide, and it's fairly easy to drift, but drifting loses time. If you try to get the car around the track smoothly, it doesn't really like it very much. It's very challenging to keep the car straight, which can be its own kind of fun, but this car was made to go sideways. It gets a time of 1 minute 42.539, just behind the heavier Maserati Gran Turismo. Nostalgia strikes again as I decided to recreate the Celine SR widebody, another classic from Gran Turismo 2 that has never reappeared in any game since. I actually tested this car before in my first run of this series, and I hated it. It took me about 30 laps to get a decent time out of the Mustang, but that was almost a year ago and there has been a gaggle of physics updates since. So will the Mustang handle any better this time around? Like all upgraded cars, this one is on racing soft tyres, and it has every performance upgrade available, including wide body, aftermarket wheels, any visual options that add downforce, and the body rigidity increase. For the setup, anti-roll bars and natural frequency are both stiffer to reduce body roll. Setting natural frequency lower at the rear will reduce oversteer, which will slightly reduce your chances of hitting pedestrians. Anti-roll bars are slightly higher at the rear, which improves stability under braking. Toe out has been added to the front to reduce lift-off oversteer, and extra toe in has been added to the rear to further help with power oversteer. LSD settings are low all around. Low initial torque and braking settings will help with agility, while a low acceleration value will send more power to the inside wheel, reducing power oversteer. A small amount of ballast weight has also been added to the rear axle, which improves traction out of corners. I found this faster overall, since without it the car was spinning away some of its power out of low-speed corners. I remember this Mustang being quite a bit worse the last time I drove it. The latest physics update seems to have made this car slightly more forgiving, and rather than having to spend 30 laps practicing and revising the setup, the car no longer tries to make me eat my own shit. It's still quite unruly though, so it will keep you on your toes. It gets a time of 1 minute 24.260. That time places it just behind the slightly less powerful Maserati Gran Turismo. The Maserati was also quite a bit easier to drive as well, so it will be more consistent. The Mustang still beats some formidable competition though, such as the Porsche 917K and the GT500 NSX. The stock car meanwhile is also behind the stock Maserati, which is once again a more consistent car to drive. The two cars though are oddly quite evenly matched. All in all, the 2015 Mustang is a pretty fun car to drive with the current physics system. It's not setting any lap records by any stretch, and its statistics would make you think it should perform better than it did, but it sounds good and it drives much better than it used to. So that was the first American road car in the Fastest Lap series. Tune in next time to see the first comment request, something small and Italian. If you have any requests for cars you want to see tested sooner, please comment down below. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful for your subscription. Take care of yourself, and ta-ra.